The physical destruction caused by 6 years of war is pretty shocking. The destruction of people's lives even more so. Millions of Yemenis have been displaced by war, and the UN says 60 million are expected to go hungry this year.
What I'm seeing, and it's heartbreaking to say that, is that starvation has taken such a hold now in Yemen that we are having a relentless countdown to famine unless there is a tremendous injection of aid and there is a famine prevention ceasefire.
This weekend, Egeland toured camps where displaced Yemenis live. The health impact of COVID-19 is outweighed by continuing war and the economic consequences of lockdowns, border closures and the global economic contraction.
Here it is a devastation of the social fabric of society. No more day labor, no more remittances from abroad, no income. So again, they fell off this cliff at the same time as the aid was cut.
No time to cut aid still further then, but that's exactly what the British announced they'd do at today's UN pledging conference.
To respond to the crisis, the UK will provide at least £87 million to Yemen over the course of the next financial year.
As the suffering has increased, British aid has decreased. In 2018, the UK gave £230 million. In 2019, 200 million. In 2020, 160 million. Then today's announcement, just 87 million for 2021.
This is a budget delivered in challenging times. We will rise to this moment. We will get through this together.
The Chancellor has hard choices to make in this week's budget, but the UN says cutting aid to Yemen will hurt the most vulnerable people in the world.
Childhood in Yemen is a special kind of hell. Yemeni children are starving. This year, nearly half of all children under 5 in Yemen are said to suffer from acute malnutrition.
Not that 2-year-old Hadil understands all this, but her grandmother knows that the main cause of the child's malnutrition is the war that forced them from their home. Despite the Biden administration's decision to suspend arms sales to Saudi Arabia, one of the main combatants, Britain has continued to sell weapons to the Saudis. In 2019, a global aid effort prevented famine in Yemen. In 2021, the war continues, and the chances of averting the worst look bleak.
Lindsay Hilsum. Well, we asked the Foreign Office if we could speak to a minister on the matter, but of course no one was available. I'm joined now by the Conservative MP, Andrew Mitchell, a former International Development Secretary. Andrew Mitchell, it seems absolutely incredible that at the very moment when the United Nations is launching a massive appeal for Yemen and the crisis there deepens, Britain, a Security Council member, decides to cut its aid by half.
It's a very dark day for a country that has been a development superpower, which has really powered forward poverty reduction around the globe. And to cut aid to Yemen, the poorest country by miles in the Middle East, in the middle of a pandemic, when we know there are famine conditions and famine is stalking the land there, with 4 million, mainly children, who will, as a result of this decision, continue the slow, agonizing and obscene process of starving to death. It's a very sad day for British leadership on development indeed.
Now, will this matter come to Parliament? And if it does, will you try to see to it being defeated?
Well, there will be an urgent question tomorrow, and I know that Parliament will have its say on the specific issue of Yemen. But of course, this is the harbinger of more cuts to come, because it's the result, effectively, of the development budget being cut by 50% this year. And it will lead to hundreds of thousands of avoidable deaths, particularly amongst children. It's a very bad day. And of course, all 650 members of Parliament elected just over a year ago were elected on a promise to stand by the 0.7, to stand by this promise to the poorest in the world. And for the government to seek to go back on that manifesto commitment is, I think, a very serious mistake. And also, they may not be able to get it through the House of Commons, which means they are effectively presiding over an unlawful budget with these terrible cuts.
I mean, one of the things one really wonders is, does Britain want to go on remaining on the Security Council? There are only 5 nations there, and, you know, if we're actually going to back out just as they want to raise the money, that's not a great sign, is it?
Well, we have done wonderful work. We've been a very bright light in some very difficult parts of the world, standing up for international values, which Britain very strongly supports. And one of the key aspects of that has been our leadership on international development. And I think there may well be a majority in Parliament who would stand by the commitment on point 7 and would say to the government, you really shouldn't make these cuts. And I very much hope the government will decide that the time has come for a vote so that they can test the will of Parliament. After all, Brexit was supposed to be about putting power back into Parliament. It wasn't about extending executive fiat. And I hope the government will test it out, be a good democratic government, and see whether Parliament and all my colleagues think this is a good idea. I don't think they do.